In this video, I'm going to show you how to design and model your own 3D objects from scratch for 3D printing or just for fun. I'm going to explain this all in super accessible, really easy to understand terms. No matter who you are, I promise you by the end of this video, you're going to be able to model your own 3D objects. For this tutorial, we're going to be using a totally free web browser-based software, so absolutely anybody could follow along. It is called Tinkercad. I'll put the name of the website up above here. Go to that website and sign up. Once you've done that, I'm gonna get you to take your phone and turn it to the left so I can walk you through everything else. Once you've created your account, click Create and then click 3D Design. What we see in front of us here is the 3D world that we're gonna create our model in. You could right click to look around, you could use a scroll wheel to zoom in and out, and if you click down on the scroll wheel, you could pan around in all directions. Now, to create pretty much anything you want, you're only gonna need to know three basic things. The first is how to combine shapes. So all objects are gonna start with a basic shape that you see on the right here. You just have to take one of those shapes and drag it into your 3D world. You see here I click and drag, and then when I let go of the click, it's gonna drag it in, and I now have a 3D shape. I could click it to move it around, and more importantly, I could scale it to change the size. So I could grab this little corner here and make it bigger, smaller in all directions, or I could scale it up and down. A really crucial thing to note here is as you're scaling it, you'll see this number here. This is the real world measurement of the thing that you're creating in millimeters. And you could change that manually. So instead of dragging it, I could click on this area here. If I want it to be 25 millimeters tall, I type 25 millimeters. Now, to create more complex 3D objects, we need to combine multiple shapes to create what we want. Here's how you do that. We're gonna make a top hat type of shape here. So a top hat's just two cylinders stacked on top of each other. So what we're gonna do is drag the cylinder in here. We're gonna make it kind of big. We'll make it like 28 by 28 or 30 by 30. I'll type in 30 here so it's a perfect circle. And then we're gonna drag this down, just make it a little bit tall. This will be the brim of our top hat. Now, to make the top part of the top hat, I need to grab another cylinder and stack it on top of there. We're just gonna do that. We're gonna adjust the shape. Let's make this 22 by 22. And we're gonna align that. We're gonna drag and drop it. You'll see we can move it around here and we'll put it on top of the other cylinder. Now we have a top hat, but this is two separate shapes. Now this is gonna be the most important part you use when you 3D model. You're gonna click and drag on both of the objects and click this button up here. This is gonna combine those two objects to make a single object. When I click group, you'll see here now this is its own independent object and its own independent shape. And that's the first skill. Just using this first skill alone, you could already make your first 3D objects. Let's say I want to put this top hat on a little head. What I could do is grab this arrow here and drag the top hat up. I could then drag a circle over here for a little head. I could make the circle a little bit bigger, just like we did before to scale out the sizing, and then I could align it underneath the top hat. I could select all of my objects again, combine them, and now we have our little guy wearing a top hat. The second skill you need to know is how to align objects. You'll see that our top hat here is a little bit off center because we just kind of placed the cylinder randomly on the top here. Let me show you how to do that properly. We're gonna delete our little guy here and then create our basic top hat shape again. So we have our two cylinders. Instead of just dragging it and trying to kind of eyeball where it goes, instead what we're gonna do is select both the objects, just click and drag, and then click this up here at the top right. It's called Align. If we click that, you'll see these dots show up. These dots are gonna allow you to align objects respective to one another. So if I wanted to line them up right in the middle of each other, I'd click these middle dots on the X and the Y axis. Watch what happens when I click this. It's gonna align it up and down center to one another. Then if I click this middle one here, they're gonna align it left and right to one another. Now that object is smack dab in the middle. I can then select them all, click combine, and now we have a perfectly aligned top hat. Aligning things properly is super important when you're making real world objects that require precision. The third and last thing you need to know, and this is the skill that's gonna allow you to model pretty much anything you want, is how to cut holes. So we're gonna put our top hat to the side here. Let's say we want to take this square here, and we want to have a cylindrical hole in the middle. When we look at our shapes here, there's no shape that's a square with a hole in it, but there's a way to do this. Now what we have to do here is think about if this block had a hole in it, what would it look like? That hole would just be a cylinder-shaped hole, right? So if we take this cylinder and drag it on top of there, that would basically be what the hole looks like. But if we combine these two, it wouldn't really do us any good because we just have a solid cylinder inside the square. Now watch closely because this is the crux of 3D modeling. What we're gonna do is take the cylinder that we just placed and we're gonna click this here, which is gonna convert it to a hole shape. You'll see it'll kind of change here to where it looks like it's kind of see-through. What this means is this shape we now have is in itself negative space. So what I can do is drag it over here, and you'll see at first nothing really happens, it's just kind of sitting there. But we're gonna use our combine tool again here. Now watch this, you're gonna see how this all comes together. What we can do is click and drag on both of the objects, and we can click combine. Watch this. It's gonna cut that hole perfectly in the square because the object we dropped wasn't a hard solid object. That object in itself was negative space. Let's look at another example. So we've got another cube here. Maybe we want to cut the corner off of this cube because we need a flat edge. What I could do is we'll drag and drop another cube onto the space. We're gonna turn it using this arrow to spin it sideways. Then once again, we're gonna convert that to a hole by clicking this here. Now check this out. If I were to drag this over top of this cube, select them both, and once again group them, you'll see that we now have a unique shape. This is the basis of modeling anything that you want. Cutting holes is a super powerful tool, especially when you realize that it's not just the default objects that you could use to cut holes, like the cube that we used before, but you could also convert your complex objects that we already made, like the top hat shape, and convert that in itself to a hole to cut. You can start to make some super complex shapes by doing things such as this. Now, let's finish our top hat. One of the biggest problems with this top hat is there's no hole for your head. I'm gonna show you how to do it here, but see if you can think about how we would solve this problem. The first thing we're gonna do is turn it upside down so it's easier for us to work in. We're gonna take this slider here and we're gonna turn the top hat upside down. Nice. Then we're gonna take a cylinder, but we're gonna make sure that cylinder's a little bit smaller than our main cylinder. So we're gonna scale that down to like 18 centimeters, or millimeters, pardon me. Now, we don't want this cylinder to cut all the way through the top of our top hat, so we're actually gonna drag that up a little bit on our workspace. So by clicking this arrow, once again, we're gonna be able to move that up, just like we did when we put the top hat above the guy's head. Now, we're gonna convert our cylinder to a hole, and we're gonna use our alignment tool, just like we did before. So we're gonna select both the objects, we're gonna use our align tool, and we just want this hole right in the center of our top hat object. So we're gonna align it left, we're gonna align it up and down. Now we have that hole ready to cut in the top hat. If I select all the objects and combine, that, ladies and gentlemen, is a top hat 3D modeled from scratch. The hard part of 3D modeling is learning how to think about everything in regards to being objects and holes. Let's model a coffee cup together to kind of go through that process. So first off, let's think about what a coffee cup is. It's just a cylinder with a hole in it at first, right? So let's model that. So we're gonna start with a cylinder, just like we did before for the top hat. Let's make that about 26 millimeters wide. I like this height, this looks kind of coffee cup-ish. Then once again, we're gonna drag another cylinder to cut that hole in the middle. So we're gonna scale that up. Once again, we're gonna drag it up a little bit because we don't wanna cut through the bottom. I'm gonna make this a little bit taller to make sure we cut all the way through the top. I'm gonna go select them both. We're gonna align them center to one another. Click align, center, center. And I think I want my coffee cup walls to be a little bit thinner than that. So before I cut this as a whole, what I'm gonna do is make it a little bit wider. I'm gonna go 21, maybe 22. Let's do it 22. Then what I'm gonna do is once again select them both. We're gonna align them. Align, align. That looks quite a bit better. Now we need to make sure we convert this object to a whole before we combine them. So we're gonna change it to a whole, select them both, and combine. Now for the hard part. Our coffee cup needs a handle. I encourage you to pause the video and think about how you would do this with the shapes we have and using negative space, but I'm gonna do it here for you right now. So thinking about a handle, it's pretty much a half donut, right? How do we make a donut? Again, we're just gonna be cutting holes in circles. So we're gonna make this a little bit bigger. We're gonna do 23 millimeters, 22 millimeters. We're gonna scale that down a little bit here. We'll do 4 millimeters wide. Then we're just gonna cut a hole in it. Again, you guys all know the drill at this point. You know how this all works. 20 millimeters sounds good. We'll select it, we'll turn it into a hole, and then we'll align these both center to one another. So now we have a ring. How do we turn it into a handle? Well, we just have to cut it in half. How do we cut it in half? Well, we just need to remove half of the space. To do that, we're just gonna take a cube. We're gonna make it really big. We're gonna cover up about half the handle. I think that looks good. We're gonna convert that cube to a hole. Click and drag on both. Combine. Now we got something that looks like a coffee cup handle. Now check this out. We're gonna go back to our combining solid objects. We're gonna drag this around so it's upright. We're gonna move this up a little bit, just kind of aligned to the coffee cup. We're gonna drag it over to here. And we're just gonna kind of freestyle this onto the cup here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna align it to make sure it's aligned properly up and down. We're gonna click and drag both of our objects and we're gonna align it center. Click that. Now, click and drag, combine. Now we have a coffee cup object. It is that easy to 3D model stuff. If you're just doing it for fun, you've done it. You're already at the end. You've made your object. But if you're doing this to 3D print, all you need to do is click export here and export to STL. This will give you a file that you can put into your slicer and then spit out on your 3D printer. In fact, I'm gonna print out this mug right now. And we are printing away. And just a few minutes later, we have the mug that we designed ourselves here in the real world. This is so cool to me that just minutes ago this was on the computer and we made it ourselves. And that's quite literally all there is to it. With those basic skills, you could design pretty much anything you need for the practical world. Like this little caddy I showed you in my last video that holds all my watchmaking oils. Modeling this was very simple. It's literally just two rectangles beside each other here that I combined together. And then I used holes to cut the spaces for each individual oil. If you're modeling around small things in the real world, like those oil bottles, I would recommend getting a tool like this called a Caliper. They're like $5 on Amazon. It allows you to super accurately measure small things, so you know how big to make the holes in things that you're cutting. A very, very useful tool that will make your life a lot easier. I'll cut the video off there because it's probably getting very long, but I hope that was helpful to at least some of you. If it was, for this one, I do ask you to like, comment, and favorite it and all that to try to get it out there more. But I appreciate all you guys taking the time to watch, and I'll catch you in the next video.